I don't know. If you've recently opened a haberdashery, I don't know you. You could have done that.
You're not far off. I do have a little e-commerce skate shop that
What?
I have hats in that store. I don't do much with it, but they're there.
It's like I read the universe, and the universe is just like, yeah, we got you. Make shit up. It'll probably be true. So, Jessica, who the hell are you?
Yeah, so I'm Jessica Frech Knowles. I've been a product designer for 8 years. Before that, did a lot of branding, content design. So over 10 years in design work. Range, never something I chose to do, just something that kind of happened to me. My first career was a professional touring musician. Started doing like all my own design stuff for that, and then fell into technology via the music industry, and then learned about startups, and then learned more about tech, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And then here I am in Utah, no longer in Tennessee. That's the wiki version.
What was the tipping point from touring musician to product designer? Like, can you narrow it down to a specific? I picked up a guitar, and 2 days later, I was designing web apps. Like,
no, it just became like more. I just started getting more work in that area and started getting less work in music because it's obviously a more particular niche career. And while I grew up in Nashville and was surrounded by it, it's still fucking hard like industry. Also, if you don't want me to swear, I can try not to. But it's just also a hard like industry
to
get into.
It is a fucking hard industry. Yeah.
So it just kind of naturally started scaling on that side, and then like descaling on music. And then I think what made it like kind of official was when I went to like do the whole boot camp, like certification. It was like, okay, now like this isn't just like I'm picking up freelance gigs and like clients. Like I'm going to actually go get a title and a job and like try the corporate thing. And then I got in it, and then I never got out of it. And so yeah, that's just kind of the path it took.
Okay, and just because my first guest was also in a band, and we hyped his band. Do you have music out there, sitting out there that people can listen to?
I have decades old music. It's not stuff that I like. It's just under my name, Jessica Frech. Knowles is my married name, but it's not anything that is new, but it's still out there.
That's okay. Exists. Yeah. I find it interesting that I know a lot of people who are in design and front end dev and obviously in development too, but a lot of them are musicians, and it's more than just, or it was more than just, a hobby. It was something they did to make a living.
Yeah. There's a designer, I won't remember his name, but I took a course from him. He's one of those designers, and I think he got axed at Headspace and is now over at Meta or Instagram. And he's really happy about that. At least what it looks like on LinkedIn. But he's also a musician, and he's touring. And it's kind of fun to see someone at like what I think LinkedIn would say is like at that caliber of career, like hooking a job at Meta, but then is also like taking time to still go tour. I mean, I would say it's like a small leg thing. It's something that's manageable with the full-time job, but it's also cool to see because it's very easy to kind of like let corporate beat the shit out of you to where you don't feel like you have any more energy to go do that type of stuff.
Quite right. They ask a lot. So, and take a lot. Yeah. So, okay. So you're roughly 8 years in. What is your perspective of your profession now on the design side versus when you started?
I instinctively wanted to say I'm less hopeful, but that sounds so.
I want instinctive.
Dark.
Yeah.
That sounds so dark.
That's fine.
I think that's with any career. Like when you first get into it, you're green and bushy-eyed, right? That's literally any career. But with product design specifically, I started doing like the boot camp when everyone was starting to spin up like the UX UI boot camps alongside their full stack boot camps. So it was just this rush, this surge, this bubble of like people very interested and excited about this career path, even though it still existed for a while. It was now like being this more formal curriculum. And so just started out very, very exciting. I would say my career has probably changed the most over the last 2 years as I've like gotten more out of senior and into like lead and like player coach roles, where I'm starting to have more face time with like executives and understand why it's such a hard battle to fight for design. When at the beginning of my career, it was like a constant, there were so many hills I was dying on, like design first, user first, user first. And then as I'm like going up this silly ladder, that's kind of getting squashed, but in almost in a good way. Like, I guess reality is setting in, realizing like, oh, there's some things that I was not taught in boot camp, which is obvious. Like, that's probably the biggest annoyance people have with boot camp is it's not a full education. There's probably some stuff that I just wasn't aware I was going to run into, like how to deal with executives and stakeholders and how to integrate design better into the corporate ecosystem instead of like dying on this hill of design first, design first.
And how do you do that?
I
Please
don't
explain.
know.
Oh, no, okay. I was
It's
hoping you would know.
It's trial and error. I can probably share what I'm learning. I still feel like this is like an early thing, a new thing that I'm learning how to do. So I can't say I'm great at it yet, but
it's the best time to be sharing things.
Right. That's when everyone shares things. And we all take
I
it.
honestly,
It's true.
No, I honestly feel that there's something to that because, like, for people who've been at a certain company for a long time or in a certain position for a long time, I think they've gotten to the point where they've found, and it's just very natural, I'm not digging on them at all, but they found ways to just do their work very efficiently that they forget about all the stuff that they had to go through. It's kind of like an expert blindness. And so when they're sharing their perspective on how things should work, how they found things to work, I think we miss out on the things that they learned along the way. And then they're just like, well, there's this right way to do it, and you can just do it this way. And it doesn't take into account the fact that maybe they've just been at that one company for a while, or one type of company in one type of position, and they've spent a lot of time optimizing their workflow to the extent with, hey, all you have to do is just, really listen to your stakeholders. Okay, well, that's really great information there. I'll just really listen to them. But you don't understand how to listen, what to listen for, who to not listen to, who to listen to more. And I feel like that stuff, when you're learning it, is more helpful to share while you're learning it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a diatribe, I'll agree. But
no, I think that's actually really, really accurate. It reminds me of something from Lenny's podcast. It's a product podcast from, I think it's by Y Combinator. They're the startup accelerator, one of the larger ones. And he was saying like, and this is maybe a little off topic from being a designer, but he was saying the worst thing you can do is like a young entrepreneur or like a young startup is listen to the advice of those that are like a year ahead of you, where they're saying, oh, well, this is how we optimize this. This is how we optimize that. Because like at that stage, you don't have anything to optimize. So why try to like go do these, like you said, expert,
the expert blindness.
Yeah, the expert blindness. Like, why try to do that when you're not an expert yet? So yeah, I think that's actually really great advice. I don't remember where I read this from.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I don't remember where I read it from, but it's probably LinkedIn or someone's blog post or some podcast. But treating our stakeholders or executives almost like users, like going through the same like discovery process and like things you would normally ask in a discussion guide when stakeholders are like constantly pushing from the top, and almost kind of switching the script and like treating them like the user instead of actually treating with your customer has helped a little bit, because at that point it's not my job to fight. I guess I'm learning it's not my job to fight. It's my job to investigate. And the more I investigate, the better solutions I'll have. And the more friendly like I'll be to work with. Like with, especially with stakeholders. I feel like there's just such an opinion right now of product in general. So product managers, product designers being gatekeepers, being the no men and stopping everything from happening. And it's sad. And I don't think it's true, but I also understand the sentiment when thinking about the stakeholder and the executive and what their goal is. It's just so different than what ours is. Yeah, I've just been trying to practice like treating them like a user instead of a stakeholder. And I've noticed that makes me it gets me less angry, frustrated. And that's always a huge win for me because I don't want to be fighting an uphill battle every single day.
What hill have you still stayed on as far as hills to die on? What are you still holding on to?
It's a good question. I don't want to have to educate stakeholders or handhold them more than like 20% of my time. And I can usually tell, like, because I'm open to work right now, so I'm interviewing all the time. And I can usually tell when the stakeholder, like either it's the business unit leader or the product director, or maybe it's like the CTO. Like a lot of startups, designers are reporting to a CTO, and they're not necessarily designers or even product minded all the time. The good ones are, but I can usually tell when I'm going to have to spend more than 20% of my time educating them on just basic product principles, not even just product design, but just general product principles. I just don't know. I've noticed that like above 20% of my time is like a threshold that causes too much stress for me and no growth and no movement and just not a fun place to be in.
Right. So you've identified a bug in the system. Okay, maybe not. Maybe we shouldn't call those kind of stakeholders bugs. But what do you find are some of the things that you notice, like behaviors or questions or maybe lack of questions that make you go, okay, this is going to require a fair bit of management?
Yeah. The questions I always make sure to ask during my interviews is, okay, can you tell me how executives or the C-suite is investing in design? Give me an example. Like, don't just tell me how they're doing it. A lot of times it's so easy to bullshit and be like, yes, like I'll be talking to a hiring manager that is a designer. Like maybe it's the chief or director of design. And you can kind of tell that they're bullshitting when you ask them how well does the company value design? They just kind of like talk in circles. So I'd rather just get examples from them of like, hey, can you tell me how they're showing that they're investing in this? How much autonomy do you feel like you have to like drive the roadmap? How much of the roadmap is top down? How much of it is it bottom up? Things like that help me reveal a little bit of that.
Yeah, it's literally this, but I've heard some version of, users are at the core of everything that we do. And when was the last time you talked to somebody? Well, we're hiring you for this position to start doing that. It's like, okay, that's great. So you're aspirationally wanting to put them at the center of everything you do. But usually by then, they've gotten pretty used to, habit-wise, of guessing their way forward. And it's really, I find it really difficult to alleviate them of that habit.
Yeah. I don't actually think that's that's a horrible idea. It's when they're guessing or making assumptions on big bets, like big projects.
Yeah.
And it's like, sure, we could do that with like a tiny thing, or let's find some way to test it out in a small way instead of let's build this entire new offering based on an assumption. I always find it, I find it tricky to share that story with stakeholders about this is what you wanted us to create. We don't really have a lot of objectives around it or like metrics to track. So we don't really know what what's the performance objective here besides just shipping the thing. And so anytime I've been in a position where the performance metric is I just want to ship something versus some type of like metric like lowering the churn rate or like adopting more users or getting more screen time, things like that, or sign up. Anytime someone has told me you're good if you ship it, that's never been the actual case for me. It's always like kind of turned around to be like, well, it isn't working, so what are you going to do about it? Or it isn't working, so you didn't do your job well. And so I'm really trying to fight that. I'm fortunately not in that situation right now, but I have been in that situation before. And so I always that's why I like mentorship and being in those player coach roles, to be able to get designers to be like, hey, you can't take those you got to put like an objective to things so that you can show your value. So when those conversations come up, it's like you have a boundary that you can kind of set and be like, this was the boundary. The boundary wasn't just to ship it. Like I actually have metrics here I'm tracking, things like that. So I haven't really figured out how to do that successfully yet, but that's what I've been trying to do.
What have you found to be, I guess, the appetite for people who are cross-functional of going through that exercise or accepting metrics other than we just need to get this out because the CEO said get it out?
I wouldn't say it's adopted super high.
Yeah.
I think designers are under so much stress objectively to just design and ship, that anytime they do carve out to like focus on something that can help them drive their career so that they can use the time on that project that's high friction as like a good, use case or case study in the future for future jobs, because they're going to ask you things like, all right, well, what metrics were you tracking? How did this provide value to the business? And it's unfortunate that like in this example, like that designer isn't going to have that. Like it's a disadvantage to them. And so that's kind of where I try to put the value to designers is like, hey, like this isn't just for now. Like this isn't just about like doing it so that you're kind of protected in this ecosystem that really doesn't understand your role yet, but also for your future self, because you don't want to do this work and waste it and walk away with just like a UI project. Unless that is your role, but I guess I'm specifically talking about like product designers and people who are also doing UX.
I'm partially curious, and we don't have to go into the details of it, but I had a recent experience with a company where ship it was the metric, or they were metrics that just didn't matter. We want people to get through the onboarding level of metric. It's like, well, great, you've designed it in such a way that you're forcing people to step through the onboarding before they can start using your application. So congratulations, like you haven't produced anything meaningful. Also, it's 11 screens. Like, come on. But I've found it just very something at every level of, or like job level throughout my career. I don't know if I've just been lucky. It hasn't been every place I've worked with or every client, but there's just seems to be more of a tendency to be really dismissive of spending a half hour thinking about how do we really want people to feel, what do we want people to really accomplish, as opposed to we're all just producers within a system to ship. And I find it just very exhausting because I can sit down with these people and say, this is dumb, right? And they're like, yeah, but what are you going to do? I'm like, well, you're a fucking product manager. Fucking do something about it,
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're a senior product manager, huh? Well, go senior something. I know that I'm picking on PMs, but because it's fun. But it's like you put together this team of people who often don't work as a team to accomplish a goal that is undefined, the success of which is if things move forward, good. Things not move forward, bad. Um, and it's such an unhealthy system that I feel like everybody is contributing to in such a way that we're not making it better. What were you saying about hopelessness again? Yeah, something like that. I'm not really hopeless about it because I've seen places where it works. I've seen
Yeah.
places where it's the stakeholders say, we need to grow revenue in order to expand the business or in order to keep the business. Find out stuff that will generate revenue and then what's it going to cost us to do it? Like, to me, that's a reasonable question and like an interesting space to try and figure out as a team to like, oh, here are 3 ways we can do it. This one costs the least, but will take us more time. What do you want to do? And then let's go do it. And I know I've said this in a previous episode, but like, instead of real example, uh, the CEO saying, oh, I thought of this idea at dinner last night. Go build this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's okay. Well, we'll build it. I don't know. I like what you were saying about treating the stakeholders as users, which partly I'm interpreting as like as equal to users, which from my perspective, users at the top, stakeholders at the bottom, employees in the middle, which is my hierarchy of needs. But um but at the same time, like there's also part of me that's like, and I think I've written about this before, but where part of design's job is to stand in front of the door that the business is trying to run through and say, no, you can't do that. Because often they're just really zany ideas that hurt the customer, that hurt the user. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's you said something that sparked that, so it's your fault.
I used to complain about that all the time. I still complain about it. But I'm starting to recognize, like, have an opinion on why that's happening often. And maybe this is just particular to like Utah startup scene or like Utah hyper growth companies, because we have a few of those. We have a couple $1 billion companies now. But what I've seen cause that type of environment has a lot to do with these large, possibly overevaluated, possibly like inflated companies that have so much money. They overspend and spend too fast. And then they make those types of decisions, right? Where it's like, I heard this idea on a podcast or our competitor is doing it, so we have to do it now instead of taking a beat. And it's almost, I don't want to say it's completely no fault of their own, but there is a little touch of like no fault of their own because they're in this position of hyper stress, hyper anxiety of meeting certain terms for investors. And then when you're in that stress, no one can make good decisions. These founders and executives are just people. And so they're making poor decisions or they have like too many yes men, women in their circle. They hired the wrong people. They're listening to the wrong voice. They're putting too much investment into one idea instead of testing, like do it on a small scale, bootstrap that idea, see if it works. And then let's funnel like more assets into it, let's spin up a whole product team to do it instead of have a great idea or our competitors doing this and it works for them. We need a whole product team for it. And then you're just, everyone that's hired to do that is just destined to lose. It's an unfair situation. And so I'm seeing more chatter around like VC and like private equity not being the saviors of companies. And I love that conversation's happening because I feel like for so long, especially in Utah, like so many people have looked at that as like the only way to do tech. Like the only way to do tech is to do it massive at scale, like be the Meta, be the Amazon. But in reality, like a lot of these people don't know what that means. Like I don't even know what that means. Like no one knows how insane like there's a reason why there's like one Amazon, like there's
Right.
like that just doesn't happen easily. And so I think now that the chatter's happening, people are recognizing like, okay, these companies are overspending or taking too many bets, big bets in the wrong direction, and it's compounding. Like I think that'll eventually hopefully have a change. And I'm hoping that means like more smaller like companies like doing really cool things that are impactful and not just these like massive companies that peak and literally fall overnight.
What do you think, or what's your perspective on design's role in contributing to that conversation, maybe to the extent it can, guiding the conversation?
I think if you let design at the table, it's going to help protect you from becoming one of those instances of putting too many big bets in the wrong places. But I also think it comes down to leadership, because if you don't have leadership that allows you to do that, that isn't speaking up for design. And that doesn't mean like just having chief design officer or chief product officer. A lot of times, at least in my experience, so maybe not a lot of times, but in my experience, I've had chief product officers that have never worked in product. I've also had like chief design officers who have never been product designers or done UX design. And so I think leadership is always going to be the first thing that kind of helps protect design. And that means like cross-functionally too. So not just having like your product or design leader, but also having like your CTO, your CEO, your founder, like aren't completely blind to what the role of UX and UI does. That way, when like they do invest in like a chief product officer or a chief like design officer or director, like they know what to expect and they don't see them as a gatekeeper. Because I was recently in that position, so I'm probably just speaking out of like what's been most relevant for me, but that was very similar to my recent role where like it on the outside it looked like they were investing in design, but they truly weren't. It's the buck stopped with a specific stakeholder, and that one stakeholder didn't know anything about product. He'd never worked in product, and he was very sales driven, which is a great quality to have as a CEO, but like he also got to either let go and trust, which is hard to do. And so I don't expect anyone to just completely let go and trust, but I do expect people to educate themselves briefly. It doesn't mean you have to learn how to use Figma. It doesn't mean you have to like read an entire book on how to be a better product designer, but I don't know, maybe it's just them spending time with that org so that they understand problems they're facing and what their role is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I poke fun at people in product a lot, or business leadership, because from the outside, what I feel is objectively, it's subjective, is just comical antics. In my kinder moments, I recall that a lot of these people end up in these positions by accident or by chance. I guess that's kind of the same thing, but with no support for how to be the best insert job title that they can be, and often no time to even go seek that support. And yet the system requires them to hit the ground running. Not that anybody ever hits the ground running, and anybody who's commenting on this right now that yes you can fuck right off, because nobody does. Hit the ground walking sometimes, sure, I'll accept that. Running, no. But yeah, it's some of the best leadership people that I've worked with are like CTOs that early in their career were designers, or product managers who came from design
Or engineering.
or engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not just solely design. It's that they've had experience in another profession And so they understand how that aspect of the system works, even if they've been out of it for a while. So they're often able to have those. I'm thinking of one CTO in particular who is like, yes, I could design and build this whole thing myself, but I'm the CTO. I don't got time for that. So I'm letting you be the design leader. Design it. My team will build it for you. And I'm not going to step on your toes unless you're doing something really egregious, which won't happen because we're talking all the time. And where lack of progress is made is when we're all fighting over who gets to make the decision about every single thing, where the
Mm-hmm.
button goes, what the feature should be, who's going to be most impacted by this, who the real user is. Uh, and it just causes wheel spinning, which I know nobody likes.
There's so many opinions on LinkedIn right now about our field and probably every field. It's just I only see my field on
I got you.
LinkedIn
Yeah.
about like just so many different things, like what to put in your portfolio, what not to put in your portfolio, how high fidelity or low fidelity should you be showing things to stakeholders, how to better talk to stakeholders or things not to say to stakeholders. Just so many opinions on how to solve like 20 different problems. And I take those with a grain of salt because I realize that those aren't the real problems. I think the real problems are like how these orgs are structured, what executives have on their team,
Yeah.
what their careers were before this, how much funding they have, and how stressed they are to meet, their quarterly requirements, or how low they are to running out of funding. It's so easy to be like, oh, it's like we can solve everything.
Mm-hmm.
But all these problems have so little to do with us. So I don't think we are going to be able to like solve a lot of these things by showing stakeholders a low fidelity prototype. They're still going to be like, I want this button over here. Let's spend the next 30 minutes talking about what the 2-word CTA is going to be for the button.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
those
30
are,
minutes, not a week.
yeah.
1 week, Jessica, on where to put a button
Oh,
and what it should
no.
say.
Oh, yeah, no, I've been there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so funny when you get out of those situations because so I just got out of a situation like that. And it's like, I look back and I'm like, there were so many red flags. And not culturally or like, I really like people I worked with, but I just design specifically that like design has no place here. I got out of it and I looked back and I was like, that it feels like I just got ejected out of a tornado. Like I didn't realize like how crazy making some of that stuff is. And so I'm preparing myself for what to do if that happens again. And I don't have an answer, but I'm like trying to figure out like how do I identify that? Because it's going to happen again. Like how do I keep myself from falling into that type of position again? But also if I find myself in that position, how do I let myself not be so emotionally and physically affected by it
Yeah.
and just let it just be like, not my problem here. I don't know the answer, but I'm trying to figure that out.
Well, when you figure it out, please let me know. I think I'm better at it. When I went to my second job as a design person, I ran into somebody at the C-level who said to me one day, our website is for how we want to present ourselves to the world. We don't care how users want to find information. Even though a large part of the website was about like, here's the product, here are the details, here's where you can buy it. And often there were users and buyers who were totally interested in different things. So finding information for them was important. But at the C-level, they didn't give a shit. And I just looked at him and I'm like, and I said this in my head. Today I would say it out loud. You don't need my help. You don't want my help. You want the design checkbox version of, yep, looks good. Might want to move that over there. And that's all you want from me. And looking back on that now, like that was in the first year or so of 3 years of being there. And I just stayed too long. To me, that's a level of intransigence or lack of interest that is, I'm not going to be able to overcome on my own, certainly.
Mm-mm.
And now I feel like a lot of those experiences have helped me ask better questions when I'm sussing out a new client or looking for a new job, to really understand, like, how sold are you on actually wanting my help. It's still a work in progress, but I think I'm really glad that I had those experiences early on and like really ran into those walls head first to understand, like, okay, you're just resistant on this, but I think we can negotiate a path forward, versus you really don't give a shit later.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to understand, like, where to draw the line, where to put your energy. And like you said, at some point you just can't let them take, I know you didn't say it this way, but like, you can't let them take that from you, that energy from you continuously without getting something back.
Mm-hmm.
Support, big fat piles of cash, whatever.
Yeah.
Your mileage may vary on that. But yeah, anyway, it's a weird thing, and I'm glad that we've resolved it. Everybody can take this advice and move forward, and sunshine and lollipops.
Yeah, we've solved all of the world's problems.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're welcome. So, okay, so I think it's time for some gotcha questions. These are questions I'm asking for everybody, from everybody, because they're questions I often ask myself, and so I want to see what other people's perspectives of them are. I call it question 7 ± 2 questions because it makes me laugh.
Mhm.
What is one thing you would change about your profession? Question mark.
Ooh. I wish it was less screen time.
Okay,
Um,
say more about that one.
what's funny is that I always wish that was less screen time, and I've never really actively tried to make it less screen time. But I mean, you can still obviously have less screen time and do like wireframe stuff up on paper if you really want to. No one has time for that anymore. I just wish it was less, because it's still such a creative role, even though it's tech, even though it's software. But with it being glued to like a computer all the time, it's not the best outlet for me personally. So I do other things like garden, and then I used to design skateboard decks and stuff. I still sell them, but haven't designed anything new for a while. But those things help. But I just wish in like outside of my career helps. I just wish inside my role, my specific role, like there was more responsibility to be like doing design work away from a computer. And I don't know what that looks like necessarily. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, maybe I need to burn everything down and do interior design.
You're the second person this month that has said that exact sentence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it because I know
No?
I'll
Okay.
find issues. I know I'll find issues in
Yeah.
that field. I'll run into
Yeah.
problems too. And so I actively choose this career, but I do wish it was a little bit less attached to my computer.
So I'll note this because it came to mind while you were saying that about like taking time to draw it out on pencil, paper, or pen if you're really feeling
Brave.
risky, brave. That I said at the last company I was at, and I've said this before, but I kind of tried to make it my mantra there because everyone was running around 17 different directions at once. There is no such thing as a design emergency. The end.
Yes. You should write a book about that. And it just has like pictures in it.
Well, working
You
on
know,
it. Yeah. Yeah. A picture book. So you're saying a picture book
yeah,
about,
like make
okay.
it super
Yeah.
digestible, like almost elementary style.
Yeah. It, I see the title. It's Look Idiot, ... And then the subtitle is how to make your design career less painful. There we go.
Yep.
Add
With
a new book to the list.
the meme of
Yep.
the fire in the background,
Yep.
the cat drinking its coffee.
What is one thing that you wish more people cared about? No constraints on where you take this.
Validating other people, listening to other people, even if you don't understand or agree with them. I only say that because I've just recently learned how to be better at that. And it's been super valuable. Like, I didn't realize how much of a wall I was of like, there's one right way to do it. This is how we do it about almost everything in my life, not just career. So yeah, I wish more people learned how to validate others without having to agree with them.
What accomplishment are you most proud of that you weren't paid to do?
My children. That's such a cliche answer. I'm specifically proud. I know I'm one of those people that's like probably obnoxious talking about this, but I birthed both my kids I had myself without meds, and that was the gnarliest, craziest experience I've ever had, but also the best. And anytime I feel small, remember that, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm so proud of that. Like, no one small can do that. So, yeah, that's probably, besides raising them, I specifically think about my labor and delivery journey with them quite often.
I don't think, in my opinion, I'll say, I don't think you should feel like it's cliche because, one of the things about cliches is a lot of people feel that way, and that's why you hear it a lot. So I think it's a reasonable perspective.
Yeah.
All right. So, probably the most important question on this list is right in the middle for some reason. No salsa, mild salsa, or spicy salsa.
Spicy all the way. And you asked at the right time because I literally just made like 2 big jars of salsa from our garden yesterday. Gave it to my kid for
How,
breakfast, and she goes, "Why is salsa spicy?" I was like, "Sorry,
that's
gotta
right.
grow up, kid."
Yeah, for dinner, wasabi. Okay.
Yeah,
How much of what ratio of ingredients or percentage of ingredients made it from your garden into the salsa?
all of it except for 1 tube of like tomato paste. Like I used a
Wow.
store-bought tube of tomato paste, but other than
Do
that,
you ha-
everything.
do you have a salsa garden? Is that the goal, or is it just you're
It's
that
not the goal.
40 acres in the backyard kind of
Well,
thing?
I I would say I wish it was 40 acres, but I wouldn't be able to have a full-time job. But then you also need a full-time job to be able to afford 40 acres. So, no, we have like, I think we have a third an acre of what I would call a homestead. I think
Hmm.
we have 6, 7, 8, we have 9 garden boxes. Tomatoes are just so easy. Peppers are easy. Onions are pretty easy. What else did we have? Oh, I guess I use store-bought cumin and pepper and salt.
Hmm.
But yeah, we just had so many tomatoes and peppers, and then some family members also have a garden, so they dumped off a bunch of onions and peppers and tomatoes. And I was like, well, we're gonna make salsa, and we're gonna make a bunch of tomato paste and freeze it.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's a good garden. You can make
Mm,
a,
good, yeah.
a full thing out of it. Like, it's pretty good.
If things got
Um,
dire, we could probably survive for a little bit, for a short
for a little
time.
bit, right? Yeah, a good 2, 3 hours. Then we'd really need internet. Maybe
Yeah.
not that bad. So, next question: what is your favorite place on Earth?
Anywhere with a beach. I know that's not specific, but it could be like a big lake, it could be the ocean. Water is like my healing, regenerate type of energy. I always really love Maine. My in-laws are from Maine, so I used to travel out there pretty often. And the lakes out there and the oceans out there, you can kind of take your pick from a lot of different bodies of water. So not super exotic, but I really do like Maine.
Well, it's not the Atlantic, but I did say hello to the Pacific for you yesterday. So
Oh yeah, you're
you're
in
you're
Oregon. Yeah,
welcome. Yeah,
thank you.
was actually out. I was like, hey, look, it's the ocean. Hi,
Jessica
ocean.
says hi.
Jessica says hi. Cool. Hi. So, relative to what first comes to mind when I say this, what do you
Uh,
wish you'd done differently?
about career or life in general.
Doesn't matter.
Career wise, I wish I was more intentional about the path that I took. Pretty much everything just kind of snowballed. I just kind of followed open doors, was not super intentional about my career path. So I wish I was a little bit more intentional with it. I only say that so that I can live with less what ifs. And then I'd probably say the same thing with my personal life. Career just takes up so much of a person's life, and yeah, choosing that intentionally, I think is important.
Yeah. So I don't mean this as like a challenging you question, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to challenge you. Do you feel you could have been as intentional as you wanted, as you now wish you had been when you started?
Oh no, no. So looking back, I definitely did the best I could with what I had. Like I've always grew up being like a hustler, so much so that I was one of those like Gary V people where it was like listening to those types of like talks and the content. It isn't that's not who I am today. Thinking like that, it gave me a lot of opportunities, but they weren't opportunities I necessarily chose for myself. And I'm still thankful I got those opportunities. I'm thankful I have the career that I have. But yeah, I do wish it was more intentional, but I just wasn't in that. I was in survival like most
Yeah.
people in their 20s when I was making these decisions. So I wasn't at all like capable of slowing down. That's just the only way I knew how to live. Um, but today I get to practice it a lot now, which is nice. I'm glad I get to
That's
practice it
awesome.
now versus, dying young from working too much and being stressed
Mm.
and hustling too much.
Yeah. Just a reminder, everybody listening, there's no such thing as a design emergency.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm gonna get a hat embroidered and wear that to every design interview from now on. And
Yeah.
that'll be the like litmus test of,
Mm-hmm.
is this a place I can work?
Right. Love the hat. Okay, I will work here. Thank you.
Mhm.
We haven't offered you the job. That's fine. I'll still work here.
Mhm.
Just please pay me. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So, if you, what would you do for a living if you left what you're doing right now?
Does it have to make money?
Okay. No.
Okay. I'd probably homestead. Like, I love being in my garden. My kids are still young. And it's funny because it's probably political, but like I'm really fighting with this thing of like being a feminist, but also wanting to be a stay-at-home mom. And if I could change anything, I just would be working the garden and hanging out with my kids until they don't need me as much anymore. But I don't get paid to do that.
Well, I'll throw out there that you could still participate in capitalism by having like a roadside stand as an honor system for buying tomatoes or something.
I know.
So
If only
that's
that paid my mortgage.
oh yeah, you want that much money? Okay,
Yeah,
well
yeah,
I got
no.
nothing then. Yeah, and also I'll say as not presenting much as, but still like feminist as fuck kind of person. I feel like the umbrella of feminism should include people who choose to be stay-at-home mom.
Oh, absolutely. It's the choice, right? It's
So
like the
yeah,
choice
it's not
that.
a this or that. It's
Mhm. Yeah,
intersectional feminism or get the fuck out is what we're saying.
that's the
I
second
probably took that a little too
hat.
far, but
The
yeah.
second hat in your line of merchandise. You should do
No,
merchandise for your
I stole
podcast.
that intersexual. I think I first read that as like I don't know if do you know Abby Jones?
Mhm.
Um, on the picture at the top of her Twitter profile, I think had maybe her or someone else wearing a T-shirt that said intersectional feminism or get the fuck out or
Hmm,
GTFO.
that's awesome.
But yeah, good one. Um, pardon me. So imagine it's a year from now. What do you hope to not be carrying anymore?
God, that's a great question. I don't want to carry the stress of my stakeholders or the stress of finding a job. I mean, right now, my stress is finding a job, but I can handle that stress pretty well because I'm getting used to it. But I know that there's a different kind of stress once I'm in my next role that I need to learn how to manage better, and that's the stress of my stakeholders or usually product directors. Usually, I've always been lucky for the most part. I can think of one instance where I didn't have a good manager, but for the most part, I've had really great managers. Most of the time, I've had great directors. It's been 50-50 on stakeholders. I don't want to carry their stress with me. It's not worth it.
So stitching together some of your answers, I hear being more intentional about work and carrying less stress from the stakeholders. And you don't have to have an answer for this right now, but like, is that, speaking of intersections, is that like an intersection of how do you move toward that? Like be more intentional to live with their stress less or manage it better, or, you know, however you want to phrase that.
I think it's of being more intentional about worth and values. So like I was saying earlier, like my 20s, everything was so hustle, hustle. All my value and all my self-worth was in career. Didn't even realize it. I feel like everyone's going through this great awakening right now. Can't tell if it's because I'm at that age, or is that really just the world right now where we're all kind of like reevaluating work and how it affects us, and capitalism in general and how that affects us. And so I want to be more intentional with where I put my worth, because I think that's the root cause of my stress. Because if I put my value in my stakeholders' approval, or, you know, them being completely praising me all the time, that's a no-win battle in most places. I've had great stakeholders who have been that type, which is probably why I have a high expectation of stakeholders, because I've been lucky to have some really great ones. And so I want to be more intentional, especially when there will be future opportunities where I have to practice, like not putting that much of my own value in their opinion, even though they might be the ones that approve my bonus or approve my promotion. It's all silly. It's all silly stuff. It's like, yeah, that's where I want, in a year, I want to be like less worried about that.
Well, I'm glad I got to talk to you.
Those are really thoughtful questions. I like those.
Well, I am amazing. Wait, no, someone else. I'm sure someone else wrote them for me.
I'm gonna steal like a 10. If I could have 10% of your confidence, I'll move in the right direction.
This sounds like arrogance, what I'm about to say, but
no,
it's actually,
I love it.
It's actually earned confidence. It's not even unearned. Like, it's weird, but I guess that's 25 years for you. So, all right, let's be real. The first 24 was unearned, but the last year I've just really turned it around.
So I'll put in the last year. Yeah. There's such a blurry line between arrogance and confidence, and my husband's one of those people that it's easy for people to like sometimes interpret it as arrogance, but it's also such a great lesson for me to be like, no, I could be a little more confident. He literally, like, we were listening to Kanye in the car the other day on the way to an event, and he was like, do you ever just he was like, do you ever just want to be like a little more cocky? And I'm like, I think I need that energy. So like, I appreciate the energy that you bring, because I think we all need to be a little bit more cocky about yourself.
Just a little bit, but not blind to one's challenges.
Tricky balance.
So last thing, I guess before I let you go, I don't know, are we bringing in guests?
Oh, you're fine. My kids are just walking by.
Okay. So, what kind of position are you looking for?
Yeah, so I'm looking for staff, principal, lead, UX, UI positions. And then I wasn't considering this, but there's a startup that I'm interviewing with right now that is considering me for a director position. That's a hyper growth type of position for me, but I would be interested if it was like startup type of environment, willing to like let me grow into some of those roles that I haven't really, responsibilities I haven't had to take on at a bigger org, but mostly that staff, principal, lead position.